My wife handed me divorce papers while I was lying in the ICU. No hesitation, no tears. "Sign it," she said. "I want a perfect man." I looked down at my legs wrapped in metal braces and white sheets that smelled like disinfectant. I signed right then. She smiled cold and satisfied. "Pay your own hospital bills." I just said, "Okay." What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that my name on that paper wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of hers. The ICU has a way of stripping people down to the truth. There's no music, no polite conversation, no illusion of privacy, just light too white, too sharp, and the steady mechanical reminder that you're still alive. Beep, beep, beep. The sound is expensive, relentless, and indifferent. It doesn't care who you are or who loves you. It only measures whether your body is still doing its job. My right leg was immobilized from hip to ankle, wrapped in a brace that felt heavier than my own thoughts. The doctor had been careful with his words earlier that morning. "You'll walk again," he said, "but it'll take time. Surgery, rehab, patience." Time I had. What I didn't have, apparently, was a wife willing to wait. I heard footsteps before I saw her. Not rushed, not hesitant, confident. The kind of steps that belong to someone who already knows how the conversation will end. The door opened, and there she was, hair-neat coat, pressed face, composed like she was heading into a meeting instead of a hospital room. In her hand was a manila envelope and a pen attached with a thin cord, as if even the pen was a prisoner of procedure. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't look at the machines or the IVs or the bruising that crept up my arms like spilled ink. She pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, careful not to wrinkle her coat. Then she placed the envelope on the small table beside me, right next to the cup of ice chips the nurse had brought earlier. "Sign it," she said, sliding the papers out with practiced ease. "I can't do this anymore." I didn't answer. I was busy noticing details. The way the top page was already filled out. Names, dates, lines perfectly aligned. Her signature was at the bottom, sharp and confident. Mine was the only thing missing. I noticed the time printed on the hospital monitor. I noticed the security camera in the corner of the ceiling, its small red light blinking steadily. I noticed the nurse's name on the whiteboard by the door. "Say something," she snapped, leaning closer. "I want a perfect man, not this." Her eyes flicked to my leg, then back to my face as if she were checking an item off a list. A burden, she didn't say, but the word hung in the air anyway. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, not grief, recognition. When something confirms what you've suspected for a long time, it stops being painful and starts being useful. I reached for the pen. My hand shook slightly, not from fear, but from the needles and the medication. I steadied it against the paper. I wrote my full legal name, the same way I signed contracts, the same way it appeared on my driver's license, and every official document that had ever mattered. I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask for time. I didn't beg. When I finished, I handed the pen back to her and looked up. "There," I said. For a moment, she looked surprised. Then her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Relief. Victory. She gathered the papers quickly, like someone afraid they might disappear if she waited too long. "Good," she said, standing. "This is better for both of us." I didn't respond. I watched as she adjusted her coat, checked her phone, and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. "Oh," she added casually, as if mentioning the weather. "You'll need to handle the hospital bills yourself. I'm not paying for this." I nodded once. "Okay." She left without looking back. When the door closed, the room felt larger, quieter. The beeping of the monitor grew louder, as if it had been waiting for silence to speak up. For a brief second, my throat tightened, not because I loved her, but because I remembered who I had been in that marriage. I had been the one who stayed calm when money was tight, the one who worked late, who planned ahead, who handled emergencies. I had been the one who believed that commitment meant endurance. And now, lying in a hospital bed, I understood something simple and brutal to her. Commitment had always meant convenience. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. When I opened them again, the nurse was standing in the doorway. She was young, tired, with dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded steady even to me. "I need to speak with hospital billing as soon as possible, and I'll need my phone." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll bring it." When the phone landed in my hand, it felt heavier than it should have, like a key. I unlocked it and opened my call log. There was one name I hadn't contacted in months. Mark, an old friend, a compliance officer at a regional bank, the kind of person who didn't panic and didn't speculate, the kind who asked questions and took notes. He answered on the second ring. "You okay?" he asked immediately. "I signed divorce papers in the ICU," I said, "and my wife told me to pay my own hospital bills." There was a pause on the other end, not shock, calculation. "Did you sign clearly?" he asked. "Yes." "With your full name?" "Yes." "And there were witnesses?" I glanced at the doorway, the whiteboard, the camera. More than enough. Another pause, then quietly, "Then you didn't just sign away your marriage, you documented her timing." I looked at the closed door and imagined her walking down the hallway light and free, convinced she'd just won. "Mark," I said, "I need you to help me check something." "Already listening." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. The pain in my leg pulsed sharp and insistent, but it had a place now. It belonged to healing. What I felt in my chest wasn't pain. It was clarity. Somewhere in this building, my wife believed she had reduced me to a problem she could walk away from. She was wrong. And the proof was already on paper. The phone rang before I had time to drift back into sleep. In the ICU, sleep comes in fragments anyway, thin, restless, stitched together by the rhythm of machines and the distant murmur of footsteps in the hall. When the screen lit up with an unfamiliar hospital number, I answered immediately. "Mr. Harris." The woman's voice was professional, careful, the kind of tone that carries bad news without admitting it's bad yet. "This is Denise from patient billing." "Yes," I said. "I just wanted to make sure we're aligned regarding your coverage. There appears to be a discrepancy." The word settled in my chest like a weight. Discrepancy, not error, not mistake. Something deliberate enough to require explanation. "What kind of discrepancy?" I asked. She hesitated. I could hear papers shifting on her end, a keyboard clicking. "According to our system, your policyholder made changes to your health insurance 2 weeks ago. Certain procedures now require additional authorization. Until that's resolved, some costs may fall to you directly." Policyholder, not spouse, not wife, policyholder. I closed my eyes and let the information line itself up neatly in my head. 2 weeks ago, I'd been healthy, working, driving, walking. I hadn't been in an ICU. I hadn't even known I'd be lying in one, staring at my own legs like they belonged to someone else. "And who is the policyholder?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Your wife," Denise said softly. There it was, the confirmation I didn't need but wanted. She hadn't just walked away when things got hard. She had rearranged the exit before the accident even happened. "What does that mean for my current care?" I asked. "It means," she said carefully, "that until the policy is reviewed, you may receive itemized bills for certain services." I thanked her because that's what adults do when systems fail them politely. After the call ended, I stared at my phone for a long moment, feeling something shift from cold clarity to something sharper. Not rage, not yet. This was the sound of pieces clicking together. A nurse came in a few minutes later to check my vitals. She noticed my expression and paused. "Everything okay?" "Can you print my admission records?" I asked, "including timestamps and visitor logs?" She blinked surprised, then nodded. "I'll request them. And I'll need the names of everyone who was on duty when I signed paperwork earlier." Her mouth tightened slightly, the way it does when someone realizes they're standing at the edge of a story they'll never hear the end of. "I can include that." When she left, I called Mark back. "She changed the insurance," I said. 2 weeks before the accident." He exhaled slowly. "Okay, that matters." "How much?" "In a system that runs on documentation," he said, "a lot." I explained what billing had told me. The pending authorizations, the potential personal liability. He listened without interrupting, then asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Do you have access to the accounts?" "Some," I said. "We share a checking account. She handles most of the logistics." "Open your banking app," he said. "Tell me what you see." I did. The numbers loaded slowly, as if they knew they were about to betray something. At first glance, everything looked normal. Balance steady, recent purchases familiar. Then I scrolled. There it was, a pending transfer, small enough to be ignored by anyone not looking closely. Labeled vaguely, scheduled for the following morning. "Mark," I said quietly, There's a transfer I don't recognize. Take screenshots, he said. Time stamped. I did. My hands were steady now. Anything else? I dug deeper. Credit card statements. A new authorized user I didn't recognize. A line of credit inquiry that hadn't existed last month. She's moving pieces, I said. Yes, he replied, before you wake up enough to notice. I closed my eyes and breathed through the ache in my leg. This wasn't just abandonment. This was preparation. She hadn't waited to see if I'd recover. She had decided the outcome in advance and arranged her life accordingly. Here's what you do next, Mark said. You don't confront her. You don't warn her. You let her keep moving. Every move becomes a record. I hung up and stared at the ceiling again. The beeping of the monitor felt different now. Less like a reminder of fragility, more like a countdown. Later that afternoon, the nurse returned with a folder. Admission records, visitor logs, names, times, everything clean and precise. Hospitals, for all their chaos, are meticulous when it comes to documentation. I flipped through the pages slowly. There it was. The exact time my wife arrived. The exact time she left. The exact window when I signed. My name written clearly with no tremor. I asked for a copy of the security policy. Not footage, just confirmation of coverage. Cameras in hallways, cameras in common areas. Time-stamped. When the nurse left, I dialed another number. Lena answered on the first ring. She'd been a paralegal for over 20 years, the kind who didn't raise her voice and didn't miss details. She changed my insurance, I said, and I signed divorce papers in the ICU. There was a pause, then, did she know you were lucid? She didn't ask. Good, Lena said. Did you sign clearly? Yes. Full legal name? Yes. Then listen carefully, she said. What she thinks is proof of your weakness may end up being proof of her intent. The pain medication wore off in waves, but my mind stayed sharp. I thought about the last year of our marriage, the quiet distance, the way she'd taken over paperwork to help, the way she'd brushed off questions with a smile that felt rehearsed. I had trusted the system, trusted the marriage, trusted that shared responsibilities meant shared values. By evening, another call came through, this time from billing again. Mr. Harris, Denise said, we're reviewing the policy changes. Your attorney's office requested documentation. My attorney, I repeated. Yes, we received a formal inquiry this afternoon. I smiled for the first time since waking up in that room. When the call ended, I sent my wife one text, just one word. Okay. She didn't reply immediately, but 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. We need to talk, no lawyers. I set the phone down and stared at it, feeling the quiet certainty settle deeper. People only ask for silence when noise is coming. I wasn't ready to talk yet. I was ready to listen. The banking app refreshed again, numbers sliding into place with the calm indifference of a system that didn't care about intent-only input. Balances, pending items, scheduled transfers. It all looked ordinary until you looked at it like someone who knew where ordinary ends. Mark had taught me that years ago, back when I helped a friend clean up after a business partner who'd been skimming just enough to stay invisible. Theft doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It pretends to be routine. I scrolled slowly. A transfer scheduled for the next morning, small, neat, labeled with a generic note that could mean anything. Then another 2 days later. Then a third set to repeat monthly. The amounts were modest. The pattern wasn't. Don't touch anything, Mark said when I called him back. No reversals, no alerts yet. Take screenshots, dates, device IDs if you can. I can see the IP history, I said. Good, that matters. I saved everything. The app showed a new authorized device added within the last week. Not mine. Not the one I used at home. A phone I didn't recognize. I felt my jaw tighten, not with anger, but with the satisfaction of a puzzle finally revealing its edges. A nurse came in to adjust my IV and noticed the phone in my hand. Everything okay? Fine, I said. Just work. She smiled, sympathetic, and left. Hospitals are full of people doing quiet work in the middle of other people's crises. No one questions it. By early evening, Lena called back. I've seen the admission records, she said. Your signature is clean. No indication of confusion. No notes about impaired judgment. What about the timing, I asked. She didn't hesitate. It helps you? How? Because it shows urgency on her part. Courts don't like urgency when it's one-sided. especially when the other party is immobilized. I closed my eyes and pictured my wife's face when she'd said, "Pay your own hospital bills," the way she'd already stepped into the future without me. "She moved money," I said. "Small amounts. Scheduled." Lena exhaled. "That's not divorce planning, that's asset preparation." "So what do we do?" "We document," she said. "Then we widen the lens." The lens widened quickly. Mark looped in a colleague at the bank's fraud unit off the record, no alarms yet. They confirmed what I suspected: the new device had been used to access not just our joint checking, but a savings account tied to my consulting business. The one I'd opened years ago to keep work expenses separate. The one she'd asked for access to just in case. "She knows where the thresholds are," Mark said. "She's staying under them." "Can you freeze it?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. "If we freeze too early, she'll know. Let her keep going." I lay back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them the way I used to count breaths during hard meetings. 1, 2, 3. I thought about the first year we were married, when money felt abstract and promises felt permanent. I thought about the second year when I'd quietly covered a shortfall and told myself it was partnership. I thought about how often trust disguises itself as convenience. The physical therapist came by before night rounds. She was practical, focused, the kind of person who speaks to pain as if it's a stubborn coworker. "We'll start with small movements," she said. "It'll hurt." "It already does," I replied. She helped me shift, guiding my leg inch by inch. Fire shot up my hip and settled into a steady burn. I gripped the rails and breathed through it. "Good," she said. "You're doing it." Later, when the room was quiet again, my phone buzzed. Another message from my wife. "I don't want to fight. We can be adults." I didn't answer. Adults don't ask for silence after rearranging someone else's life. Instead, I called a lawyer Lena recommended, older, measured, the kind who spoke in complete sentences and never rushed the end of one. He listened without interrupting, then asked a series of questions that felt less like curiosity and more like inventory. "Who owns the business account?" he asked. "I do." "Whose name is on the insurance policy?" "Hers." "Any power of attorney?" "No." "Any emails or messages about money recently?" "Plenty," I said. "Nothing explicit, plenty suggestive." "Good," he said. Suggestive becomes explicit when paired with timing. He explained the path forward calmly. No dramatics. A temporary hold request prepared but not filed, a preservation notice to retain digital records, a plan to restore insurance coverage through my employer once I was discharged. Options that sounded like air after being underwater. "Do not meet her alone," he added. "She wants to," I said. "No lawyers." He chuckled softly. "Of course she does." After the call, I opened my email and searched her name. Threads popped up, mundane messages about groceries, reminders, appointments. Then buried deeper, a short exchange from months ago with someone listed as advisor, financial language, casual tone, suggestions about restructuring and protecting assets. I forwarded everything to Lena and the lawyer. I labeled the folders simply timeline. Near midnight, the monitor beeped steadily as I drifted into shallow sleep. I dreamed of signatures, names written over and over, each one heavier than the last. When I woke, my phone was buzzing again. "We should meet tomorrow," she wrote. "Somewhere quiet." I stared at the message and felt the calm certainty return. The kind that comes when you stop trying to be fair and start being accurate. I typed a single reply. "Tomorrow works." Then I set the phone down and reached for the remote to dim the lights. The room softened. The beeping faded into the background. In the darkness, my leg throbbed with a pain that meant movement, not damage. She thought she was moving ahead. What she didn't realize was that every step she took was leaving a print. By morning, the hospital room felt less like a place of recovery and more like a staging area. My leg still burned with the deep, persistent ache that physical therapists call productive. But my mind was alert in a way it hadn't been since before the accident. Pain had a direction now. So did I. I showered with help, slow and careful, letting the water run over skin that still felt unfamiliar. Hospitals have a way of making your own body feel like borrowed property. When I was dressed again, simple clothes, nothing dramatic. I looked at myself in the mirror mounted to the wall. I didn't look broken. I looked thinner, sharper around the eyes, awake. My phone buzzed while I was buttoning my shirt. "Let's meet at the cafe on Oak Street. Noon, quiet place, no drama." Oak Street. I almost smiled. It was the kind of place she chose when she wanted control without witnesses who mattered. Public enough to feel safe, polite enough to keep voices down, respectable. I forwarded the message to my lawyer. He replied a minute later. Public is fine. Do not accuse. Ask questions. Let her talk. That had always been my strength. Listening. Before noon, Lena came by the hospital with a folder tucked under her arm. She didn't sit right away. She stood near the foot of the bed and looked at me carefully, like someone checking the alignment of a structure before stepping inside. I ran a search on the advisor, she said. I waited. Name's Daniel Price, financial consultant, not licensed in our state but operating through an LLC registered to a shared workspace. He's been flagged twice in civil cases. Not convicted, just close. Close how, I asked. Close enough to know where lines are drawn, she said, and how to walk right up to them without crossing. The third name. I felt it settle into place. This wasn't just my wife deciding to leave. This was a plan, a sequence. Someone else had helped her imagine a future where I was an obstacle, not a partner. Anything else, I asked. She slid a paper across the tray table. Email headers, timestamps, messages forwarded from my account. He suggested moving assets gradually, she said. Small amounts. He mentioned insurance leverage. Not in writing, but he nudged. I closed my eyes for a moment. The room hummed softly around me. Let her talk, Lena repeated. People like him teach people like her to believe they're smarter than they are. At 11:30, a nurse came in to disconnect my IV. You're clear to leave for a couple of hours, she said. Just don't push it. I won't, I promised. She hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, she added quietly, we all remember who was here yesterday. And how. I nodded. It mattered more than she knew. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and old wood, the kind of place where conversations go to stay hidden. I arrived a few minutes early, leaning on a cane I didn't strictly need, but wasn't ready to abandon. A friend of Mark's sat at a corner table pretending to read. Not a spy, just insurance. She was already there. My wife looked composed, hair perfect, neutral dress, minimal jewelry. She stood when she saw me, concern arranged carefully on her face. You should be resting, she said. I am, I replied, taking a seat. This is rest. She frowned slightly, then smiled. I didn't want things to go the way they did. Yesterday was emotional. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Why did you change the insurance, I asked. Her eyes flicked away for half a second, just long enough. I didn't, she said. That must be a misunderstanding. I nodded slowly. Interesting, because the billing department says the policyholder made changes 2 weeks ago. She crossed her arms. I manage those things, you know that. Yes, I said. Why then? She sighed, leaning back as if the question tired her. I was being practical. You weren't working. The accident hadn't happened yet, I said gently. That stopped her. She recovered quickly. I was planning ahead. For what, I asked. She smiled thin this time. For reality. I took a sip of water and let her continue. You've always been idealistic, she said. I needed to be realistic, Daniel agrees. I didn't react. I simply noted the name. Daniel, I asked. She froze, just for a breath. My advisor, she said. You're twisting things. No, I said calmly. I'm understanding them. Her voice sharpened. Why are you interrogating me? You signed. You agreed. I agreed to the divorce, I said. Not to being dismantled. She leaned forward. You're being paranoid. Maybe, I said. Then help me understand the transfers. Her mouth opened, then closed. What transfers? The scheduled ones, I said, from the business account. Her jaw tightened. That's my livelihood too. Legally, I said, it isn't. Her eyes flashed. You think you can fight me like this from a hospital bed? I smiled then. Not wide, not cruel, just enough. I'm not fighting, I said. I'm listening. She stood abruptly, chair scraping. This is pointless. As she turned to leave, she added, Daniel said you'd do this. Pretend to be calm. Try to trap me. I watched her walk toward the door, posture stiff steps faster than she intended. The bell chimed as she left. I sat there for a moment longer, then stood slowly and made my way out. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, not because things were over, but because they were finally visible. My phone buzzed. We have enough, Lena texted, more than enough. I leaned against the car and closed my eyes. The pain in my leg flared, then settled. Somewhere between the cafe and the hospital, my wife was probably calling Daniel, explaining, adjusting. She still thought she had time. She didn't. The hospital corridor smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee when I returned. The rhythm of the place had shifted for me. I no longer felt like a patient waiting to be fixed. I felt like a witness who had already taken notes. The meeting at the cafe hadn't given me closure, but it had given me confirmation. Names spoken aloud have weight. Once she said Daniel, the story stopped being theoretical. By the time I was back in my room, Lena had already sent a short message. She walked straight into it. I didn't reply. There was nothing to add. An hour later, Mark called. "Your bank flagged another access attempt," he said. "Same device, same IP range. She's nervous." "Did you stop it?" I asked. "Not yet, we logged it." That was the strategy now. Let the system breathe. Let it record. Middle-aged life teaches you that rushing is what gets you blamed later. Precision is what keeps you standing. That evening, the physical therapist returned. She helped me stand for longer than before. The pain blooming hot and immediate, then receding into something manageable. I focused on my breathing, on the metal bar under my hands, on the simple fact that my body was still cooperating. "You're doing well," she said, "not just physically." I smiled faintly. "You can tell." She nodded. "People who give up stop asking questions. You're asking all the right ones." After she left, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my wife. "I don't want this to get ugly. We can fix this quietly." I read the message twice, then placed the phone face down. Quietly. That word again. People only ask for quiet when noise would expose them. Later that night, I opened my email and found a new message forwarded by Lena. It was a scheduling request from Daniel's firm addressed to my wife, copied to a generic inbox. Subject line: asset restructuring follow-up. I stared at it for a long time. Then I forwarded it to my lawyer and typed a single line: "now." The next morning began with a call from hospital administration. A man with a careful voice introduced himself and explained that my coverage was under review due to inconsistencies. He emphasized that nothing had been decided yet. I thanked him and asked for everything in writing. When the call ended, I felt a strange sense of calm. The system was moving. Slowly, yes, but systems always do. And when they do, they leave tracks no one can erase. At noon, my wife called, not texted, called. "Why is the bank asking questions?" she demanded without preamble. I held the phone away from my ear for a second, then brought it back. "Which questions?" "You know exactly what I mean," she snapped. "This is unnecessary." I let the silence stretch. It was long enough for her to fill it. "You're trying to punish me," she said, "after everything I've done for you." "For me," I repeated softly. "Yes," she said, voice tight. "I stayed. I handled things. I took responsibility." I pictured her in the ICU, standing straight, envelope in hand. Responsibility has many costumes. "I signed," I said. "That's what you wanted." "Yes," she said quickly. "So why are you doing this?" "Because signing isn't the same as disappearing," I replied. She laughed short and sharp. "You think you're smarter than this?" "No," I said. "I think you underestimated paperwork." She hung up. 10 minutes later, Mark texted: "Freeze initiated on business account pending review. You're protected." I closed my eyes and let the relief wash through me, not triumphant, not joyful. Clean, like a wound finally stitched. The next message came from my lawyer. "We're filing for temporary financial restraint this afternoon. Insurance reinstatement is in motion. Hospital bills will be apportioned." Apportioned, such a neutral word for something that had felt so cruel just a day earlier. In the afternoon, my wife sent another message. Longer this time. "Daniel says this is getting out of hand. We should slow down." There it was. Confirmation without confession. I typed back a single sentence: "Tell Daniel to stop contacting my accounts." She didn't respond. That evening, a nurse came in with paperwork. "Administration asked me to give you this," she said. "And I just wanted to say, I'm glad you asked for copies yesterday." "So am I," replied. I signed the receipt with the same full name I'd used on the divorce papers. Steady, legible, identical. Identity is consistency. As night settled, my phone buzzed one last time. A voicemail notification. I listened. "Please," my wife said, her voice lower, now strained. "We don't need to do this. I didn't mean for you to get hurt." I replayed the message once. Then I deleted it. Pain is one thing, injury is another. What she'd done wasn't an accident. It was a sequence, and sequences can be proven. I turned off the lights and stared into the dark. Somewhere Daniel was probably explaining damage control. Somewhere my wife was realizing that silence had costs. In the ICU, she had called me a burden. On paper, the burden was shifting. The first official notice arrived before sunrise, slid quietly into my inbox like it had always belonged there. Subject line, temporary financial restraint confirmation, no exclamation points, no drama. Just language written by people who understood that when systems move, they don't announce themselves. They document. I read it twice, not because it was confusing, but because it was precise. Accounts frozen pending review, access restricted to primary holder. Any attempt to bypass would be logged and escalated. The kind of message that doesn't threaten it informs. Mark called a few minutes later. "It's live," he said. "She can't move anything now." "Did she try?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "Twice, the same device." I imagined her staring at her phone, refreshing the screen, convinced there had to be a mistake. People who've always had access confuse access with entitlement. When it disappears, they take it personally. The hospital room felt different that morning. Less temporary, less borrowed. The light through the blinds was softer, warmer. The monitors still beeped, but it no longer sounded like a countdown. It sounded like confirmation. My lawyer arrived mid-morning with a slim folder and a look of quiet satisfaction. He didn't sit down right away. He stood near the window and skimmed through the papers one last time, as if aligning them with the outside world. "We filed," he said. "Temporary restraint preservation of records and a formal request for insurance reinstatement. The hospital is cooperating." In her response, I asked, "She hasn't submitted one yet," he said. "That tells me she's scrambling." He explained the next steps carefully. The judge would review timing, intent, the sequence of events. Signing in the ICU, insurance changes prior to the accident, attempted transfers during hospitalization. Each item alone might have been explainable. Together they formed a pattern. "Courts don't punish feelings," he said. "They respond to conduct." In the afternoon, billing called again, this time with a different tone. "Mr. Harris, Denise said your insurance coverage has been provisionally reinstated while the matter is under review. Any charges incurred during this period will be processed accordingly." Processed accordingly, another neutral phrase. Another door closing quietly behind someone who thought they'd already left. I thanked her and hung up. The pain in my leg flared as I shifted, but it felt manageable. Purpose has a way of dulling physical discomfort. Or maybe it just gives it somewhere to go. That evening, my wife tried calling again. I let it ring. Then she texted, "This is spiraling. We need to stop before it gets worse." Worse for whom, I wondered. I didn't respond. Silence, I'd learned, isn't passive, it's selective. The next morning, physical therapy pushed harder. I stood longer, took 2 careful steps with the walker. Sweat pooled at my temples. The therapist watched closely, hands ready but not hovering. "You're adapting fast," she said. "So is everything else," I replied. When I sat back down, exhausted but upright, my phone buzzed. A new email. This one from Daniel. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'd like to clarify my role." I forwarded it to my lawyer without comment. 5 minutes later, the lawyer called. "He just made himself relevant," he said. By noon, the system spoke again, this time through the bank. An official fraud alert notice outlining attempted access after restriction. No accusations, just facts. Dates, times, device IDs. Mark texted a single line. "This is what accountability looks like." In the afternoon, my wife finally sent something that wasn't defensive. "I'm scared." I stared at the message longer than the others. Fear changes the tone. It strips away strategy and leaves something raw. I typed, then erased, then typed again. Finally, I sent, "I'm not doing this to you. I'm stopping what you started." She didn't reply. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since the accident. No dreams, no jolts awake, just rest. In the morning, the nurse smiled when she came in. "You're getting discharged tomorrow," she said. "Rehab will continue outpatient." Tomorrow. A word that had felt abstract was suddenly concrete. Before lunch, my lawyer returned with an update. "She's agreed to the temporary orders," he said. "No contest. Insurance costs will be split according to statute. Business accounts remain solely yours. Any attempt to interfere will have consequences. And Daniel, I asked. He smiled slightly. He's distancing himself. Of course he was. Advisors like him don't stay when documentation shows up. They vanish into plausible deniability and hope memory fades. As the day wore on, messages slowed. Calls stopped. The noise receded, replaced by the steady hum of resolution. That evening I stood again. 3 steps this time. Slow, deliberate. Each one a reminder that movement doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. I sat back down, breathless, smiling despite the ache. In the ICU, she had reduced me to a problem. Now the system had reduced the situation to facts. And facts, unlike people, don't flinch. The morning I left the hospital, the light felt different on my face. Not brighter, truer. As if the world hadn't changed, but I had finally stepped into it without filters. The nurse helped me into a chair by the window while discharge papers were printed. She moved with the practiced calm of someone who has seen endings begin many times. Take it slow, she said, tucking the blanket around my legs. Healing isn't a race. I know, I replied, and for the first time I meant it. My lawyer arrived just before noon. No folder this time, just a thin envelope, and a look that didn't ask for attention. He sat across from me and spoke the way he always did when something was finished. She signed, he said. The temporary orders are now standing orders. I waited. I learned not to rush conclusions. The business remains solely yours. Access revoked permanently. Insurance costs are apportioned by statute. She's responsible for her share retroactive to the date of change. Any further interference triggers penalties. In the transfers, I asked. Reversed, he said. Documented, logged, the record will follow. I nodded, not in triumph, in understanding. This wasn't a win, it was a correction. What about contact, I asked. He met my eyes. You're not required to respond. If she contacts you, it goes through counsel. I exhaled slowly. There it was, the quiet boundary I hadn't known how to draw before. After he left, I stared at the envelope in my lap. Inside were copies, orders, notices. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic. Just paper that said what was and what wasn't anymore. When the transport arrived, the physical therapist walked with us to the door. You'll keep getting stronger, she said. But remember, progress isn't just measured in steps. Outside, the air was cool, clean. The parking lot shimmered slightly the way heat makes distance feel unreal. I sat in the car, careful, patient, and closed the door. The engine started. We pulled away. At home, I paused at the threshold. For years, this door had opened into compromise, into shared decisions that weren't always shared, into silence dressed up as peace. I unlocked it and went in alone. The house was quiet, not empty. Just quiet. I moved slowly, cane tapping lightly against the floor, and lowered myself onto the couch. Sunlight filtered through the window and landed on the coffee table where a single envelope lay waiting. The one I'd asked to be delivered here. I opened it. A brief note, 3 lines. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to stop. I'm sorry. I folded the paper and set it down. Not because it meant nothing, but because it didn't get to mean everything. I brewed tea and sat back, letting the steam rise. My leg ached deep and steady, but it was the ache of rebuilding. I'd learned the difference. In the afternoon, my phone buzzed once. A notification from the bank, all holds confirmed. Account secure. I turned the phone face down and didn't pick it up again. That evening, I took 3 steps without the cane. Slow, careful, enough. I stood there breathing, feeling the weight of my body where it belonged. When I sat again, I didn't feel victory. I felt direction. I thought back to the ICU, to the white light, the pen, the words perfect man. I understood something now that I couldn't then. Perfection had never been the goal. Control was. And when control breaks, the person holding it panics. I hadn't panicked. I documented. Later, as night settled, I opened the window and let the room breathe. The city hummed outside, indifferent and alive. I felt something loosen in my chest, not relief exactly. Space. My phone buzzed once more, a voicemail. I listened. I won't contact you again, my wife said. Her voice was quieter now, smaller. I see it. I see what I did. I didn't call back. I didn't delete it either. I let it exist. Some things deserve to be acknowledged without being answered. I sat there for a long time, tea cooling in my hands, and thought about the word burden. how easily it's used, how rarely it's defined. In the end, I realized this: the real burden isn't injury or time or patience. The real burden is pretending you don't deserve respect. I deserved it. I always had. If you're listening to this and something in your chest tightened along the way, don't ignore it. Sometimes the body knows before the mind catches up. Sometimes the paper matters more than the promise. Sometimes silence is not peace. It's a pause before clarity. If you want to know where this journey goes next, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I read every message. And if stories like this matter to you, stories about dignity, about quiet strength, about choosing yourself without shouting, subscribe and stay with us. We share them every day. This isn't about revenge, it's about return.